Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories in English. Fluency in English is something that many people want to achieve. I remember well when I also wanted to speak English confidently and fluently, but I was shy and made a lot of mistakes. Hi, I'm Noah. Today, we're going to talk about something super important: how you can speak English better than ever. If you've ever felt stuck, as if, no matter how much you studied, speaking English was still difficult, know that you're not alone. Many students go through the same thing, but the good news is that you can improve, and it doesn't have to take years. With the right techniques, you can start speaking better right now. Now, let's move on to Chapter 1, the beginning of the journey. Ever wondered what separates fluent speakers from beginners? It's not that fluent people know all the words or never make mistakes. In fact, they make mistakes all the time. The big difference is trust. Fluent speakers are confident in their ability to communicate, even when they don't know all the words or grammar rules. They don't get stuck when they forget a word. They keep talking, and that's what makes them seem fluent. Now, imagine this. You're in a conversation, and the words just come out. You're not thinking about grammar. You're not hesitating. You're just speaking. That's the goal, but how to get there? Let me share something that will help you reach that point. You might be surprised, but small changes in the way you practice can make a huge difference. It's not necessary to completely change your study routine or learn thousands of new words. What you really need are some simple techniques that will help you speak with more confidence. So what's the first step? It's building the foundation of fluency, and that starts with confidence. If you don't feel confident, it's difficult to speak well. But the good news is that confidence isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. And I'll show you how to do it. Here's the truth: anyone can speak better than before, regardless of their level. If you have difficulties with English or are afraid to speak it, this podcast is for you. Let's go step by step, breaking the process down into simple techniques you can start using today. And in the end, you will be speaking English with much more confidence than ever before. But before we talk about the techniques, let's understand why confidence is so important. When you are confident, you are not afraid of making mistakes. You speak freely, and even when you make a mistake, you don't let it stop you. You know that moment when you make a mistake. That is great. With every mistake, you learn. Every time you practice speaking, you are not only improving your language skills, but also your confidence. I really like a quote from Winston Churchill: "Success is not definitive, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." This applies perfectly when we talk about learning English. The more you speak, the more confident you become, and consequently, your fluency improves. I know what you're thinking, but what if I still don't feel confident? Don't worry, this is completely normal. Confidence comes with practice. The more you talk, the better you will get, and the more confident you will feel. And I'm going to give you a little challenge to start. Set a goal to speak English every day, even if it's just for 5 minutes. It can be with a friend, a family member, or even alone. The important thing is to start talking, even if it seems uncomfortable at first. In the next chapters, we'll explore exactly how you can build that confidence and improve your speaking. We'll talk about listening techniques, shadowing, repetition, and even fun ways to practice. And remember, the secret is to start. Speaking English is not about being perfect, but about making progress. And there is a technique that can help you take the first big step towards fluency. It's something that many students overlook, but it's the secret to improving faster than you think. Now that we've talked about confidence, let's dive into the first fundamental technique for improving your speaking: active listening. Maybe you think that speaking fluently is just about talking, but the truth is that you can't speak well if you don't know how to listen well. Listening is the basis of fluency. Think about it. When you listen, you're not just hearing words. You're learning how sentences flow, how native speakers connect ideas, and how certain words are pronounced. When you master listening, you will notice that speaking becomes easier and more natural. It's like filling your mind with the right tools before you start building. But it's not worth any kind of listening. No, you need to practice active listening. This means really paying attention to what you are listening to. It's not just listening in the background, but focusing on what's being said, absorbing every detail. When you're practicing active listening, it's not enough to just let the words wash over you. The secret is to focus on them, break them down into parts, and understand how they are being used. For example, when listening to a podcast, a story, or even a conversation, pay attention to how the speaker structures their sentences. Is he using short or long sentences? How does he pronounce certain words? How does he express ideas? Active listening is noticing all these details and learning from them. One of the best ways to practice active listening is through shadowing. This technique consists of listening to a speaker and immediately repeating what he says. It's like you're his shadow, following his words as closely as possible. This is a powerful way to improve your listening and speaking at the same time. Here's how you can practice shadowing. First, choose a podcast or story. It doesn't have to be something very long or difficult, okay? You can find great options for beginners on my YouTube channel. Second, listen carefully. Start with a short phrase or sentence. Pay attention to the speaker's rhythm, how he pauses, how he emphasizes certain words. The practice of shadowing is super effective for improving your speaking and pronunciation. After listening to a phrase or sentence, pause the audio and repeat what was said, trying to imitate the speaker's speed and intonation. Keep repeating this process for a few minutes every day. You will notice that your pronunciation and fluency begin to improve over time. The cool thing about shadowing is that it helps you speak without thinking too much. You're not translating everything in your head, just repeating what you hear, and this makes you become more fluent naturally. But look, there's something important you need to know. Don't worry about being perfect. When you're practicing shadowing, you're going to make mistakes. You might miss a word or pronounce something wrong, and that's okay. The goal is not to be perfect, but rather to feel comfortable speaking without hesitation. The more you practice, the more fluent you will become. I remember a student of mine, Sarah, who was super shy when speaking English. She was afraid of making mistakes, so she practically didn't speak. I introduced her to shadowing, and it completely changed the way she practiced. She started repeating phrases from podcasts. At first, she had difficulty, but over time, the mistakes became fewer, and her confidence increased. After a few weeks, Sarah began to notice that her sentences were coming out more easily. Shadowing helped her build confidence, and soon she was speaking without fear. This reminds me of a quote from Stephen Harvey that is perfect for this moment. Most people don't listen with the intention of understanding, but with the intention of responding. Active listening teaches you to really understand what is being said, and when you do, speaking becomes much easier. But this is where things get even more interesting. Active listening and shadowing are just the beginning. There is another technique that will help you take your fluency to another level, and it's all about repetition. In the next chapter, I'll show you how repeating what you hear can make speaking English as natural as breathing. Now, let's talk about the repetition technique. We've already discussed the power of active listening and shadowing. Now it's time to talk about something that seems simple, but is incredibly effective: repetition. Maybe you're wondering why repeating things is so important. The answer is simple. Repetition is how your brain learns to speak fluently, without hesitation. It's like when you practice something until it becomes automatic. When you repeat words and phrases, you are training your brain to remember them quickly. The more you repeat, the more natural they become, until you can use them without even thinking. It's like learning to ride a bike or memorizing a song. You repeat it until it becomes automatic. Speaking English is exactly the same thing. And here's an interesting thing. Fluency is not just about knowing a lot of words, but about being able to use the words you know quickly and easily. Repetition helps you get to that point where you no longer need to stop to think about grammar or vocabulary. You simply speak. I'm going to tell you a story about one of my students. Paul. He knew many words in English, but he always hesitated when speaking because he kept thinking about what to say. I introduced him to the repetition technique. Every day, Paul chose 5 common English phrases and repeated each of them 5 times. At first, it seemed kind of boring, but after a week, Paul realized something incredible. He could say these sentences easily, without hesitation. Repetition made all the difference. So how can you use repetition to improve your speaking? Let's break this down into simple steps. First, repeat common phrases. Start with phrases you use often, like how are you, or what's your name. Repeat these phrases out loud several times. This will help your brain get used to saying them quickly. You can do this while walking, cooking, or even in front of a mirror. The goal is to make these sentences sound natural. Second, use the mirror technique. This is a great way to practice repetition. Stand in front of a mirror and say the same sentence 5 times. Pay attention to the movements of your mouth. Focus on your pronunciation and get used to seeing yourself speaking English. This technique not only improves your fluency, but also increases your confidence, because it's like practicing with someone else. Finally, combine shadowing with repetition. Remember the shadowing we talked about in Chapter 2? You can combine shadowing with repetition to have an even greater impact. When shadowing a podcast or story, repeat phrases as closely as possible to the original speaker. Then, when you finish shadowing a few phrases, repeat them again, but this time on your own. This will further strengthen your speech and confidence. Now is where the magic of repetition really appears. It transforms what you hear into what you can say easily. As Aristotle says, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit. Repeating phrases, sentences, and words makes English a habitual practice, and it is this habit that leads to fluency. Another way to practice repetition is to record yourself. Choose a short excerpt from a podcast or story. You can find several on my YouTube channel. Read it out loud, record yourself speaking, and then listen to the recording. Repeat the phrases again. This not only helps with fluency, but also allows you to track your progress over time. You will notice that you sound more natural and fluent. Another important tip: start with small but consistent steps. You don't need to start repeating long paragraphs or difficult sentences. Take simple sentences like I'm going to the store, I like reading books, or can you help me, and practice them daily. Small but constant practice will generate big improvements in your fluency. And remember, repetition doesn't have to be boring. Of course, you will repeat the same phrases, but you can vary the contexts. For example, practice the same sentence in the morning and then at night. But now imagine you are in a different situation, perhaps talking to a friend or ordering at a restaurant. This makes repetition more interesting and effective. Finally, there's one more reason why repetition is so powerful. It helps build confidence. The more you repeat something, the more comfortable you feel saying it. And when you're comfortable, fluency comes naturally. Speak without fear, hesitation disappears, and your words begin to flow naturally. But here comes the most exciting part. Repetition is just one piece of the puzzle. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how to make practice fun. You'll learn how to turn English into something you actually look forward to every day, rather than something that feels like hard work. Now, let's move on to Chapter 4. Making practice fun. Speaking English does not have to be an obligation. In fact, the more fun the process is, the faster you will improve. When learning is enjoyable, you will naturally want to practice more. This chapter is about turning your English practice into something you actually look forward to every day. Just imagine, instead of forcing yourself to sit down and study, you actually start to enjoy speaking English. It's not about memorizing grammar rules or memorizing words, but about having fun and being excited about what you've learned. But how to make practice fun? Let's explore some techniques that will transform your speaking practice into an activity you love. The first step is role-playing. How about putting yourself in real situations and starting to interact? One of the best ways to make English more fun is through role-playing. In this type of practice, you put yourself in different situations, as if you were really there. It could be ordering a coffee at a cafe, having a job interview, or even meeting new friends at a party. The cool thing about role-playing is that you are practicing real conversations in a light and fun way, without pressure. How to start? First, choose a situation. Think of something common, like asking for directions or placing a food order. Then create a dialogue. Write down some sentences you would use in this situation. Now, it's time to get into character. You can do this alone or with a friend. Imagine yourself in the real place and use the sentences you have prepared. The coolest thing about role-playing is that it helps you feel comfortable with everyday phrases and situations. And on top of that, it's more like acting than studying, which makes everything much more enjoyable. I'll tell you a story about one of my students, Anna. She used to get bored practicing English alone. I introduced her to role-playing, and suddenly her practice sessions became much more exciting. She began to imagine herself in various situations, which made learning much more interesting and fun. Travel, order food, meet new people, all while practicing English. Over time, Anna's speaking skills improved, and she didn't even realize that she was actually studying. Another way to make practice fun is to talk about what you love. Think about something you really enjoy, whether it's a hobby, a sport, a favorite movie, or even a book. When you talk about things that interest you, the words flow naturally, and you're more motivated to keep talking. For example, if you love cooking, try talking about your favorite recipes in English. Describe how to make the dish you like most, or imagine that you are teaching someone how to cook. The trick is to choose a topic that excites you, so you feel more engaged while practicing. And here's a quote from Albert Einstein that fits perfectly. Creativity is intelligence, having fun. When you practice talking about what you love, you are using your creativity, which makes the process more enjoyable and effective. Finally, why not play talking games? Who said learning a language can't be fun? There are several talking games that you can play alone or with friends. They are a great way to have fun while improving your English communication skills. A fun way to practice English is by playing speaking games with a partner. These games challenge you to think and speak in English, but in a light and relaxed way. Here are some suggestions. 20 questions. Think of an object, and your partner should ask yes or no questions to find out what it is. If you are practicing alone, you can switch roles for each question. Riddles. Mime a word or phrase in English without saying anything, and your partner has to guess what it is. Speaking challenges. Set a timer for 1 minute and try to talk about a specific topic without stopping. This helps improve your fluency and speed. These games force you to think quickly and speak without worrying too much. And the best part is that, because they are fun, you will feel motivated to keep practicing. Another way to keep practice fun is to use podcasts and stories. Listening to podcasts and stories not only improves your listening skills, but also gives you great topics to talk about later. After listening, try to summarize the story in your own words or discuss with a friend. You can find many interesting stories on different podcasts, which will help you practice English in a fun and natural way. I have several podcasts on my YouTube channel, made especially to help students like you improve their English. The tip here is to choose a topic that interests you, listen to the story, and then practice talking about it. This way, you learn with engaging content and even train your speaking skills. I'll tell you about Tom, one of my students. He had difficulties staying motivated to practice speaking, but when he started listening to podcasts about topics he really liked, like technology and travel, the words started to come out naturally. He would listen to the episodes and then practice explaining what he had heard, either to himself or to other people. This made his practice much more effective and, best of all, fun. Now, another tip: change your environment. Sometimes a simple change in where you practice can make things more exciting. Instead of sitting at a table, How about practicing in different places? Go for a walk and describe what you see in English. Sit in a cafe and pretend you're talking to the barista. The idea is to take the practice into the real world. When you change the environment, you keep things fresh and interesting, as well as practicing English in situations that actually happen in everyday life. Don't forget to celebrate your progress. It doesn't matter if they were small victories. Celebrate each step. Were you able to speak English for 5 minutes without stopping? Did you successfully simulate a conversation? That's reason to celebrate. Recognizing how far you've come is an amazing way to stay motivated and keep practicing. As B.F. Skinner's famous quote goes, "A person who feels appreciated will always do more than expected." This goes for you too. The more you recognize your own progress, the more motivated you will feel to keep improving. Now, you might be thinking, that's all great, but what about when I hit a roadblock? What about when I feel like I'm stuck? Don't worry, this is completely normal. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how to overcome these blocks when speaking and how to keep moving forward. Even when everything seems difficult, we come to chapter 5, how to break down blocks when speaking. So far, you've learned how to make practicing English fun with role-playing games, speaking games, and podcasts. But what happens when you feel trapped? When the words don't come out and the fear of making mistakes takes over? These blocks are completely normal and every student experiences them. The key is to understand how to overcome them. First, let's recognize something important. Making mistakes is part of the learning process. One of the biggest reasons people feel blocked is the fear of saying the wrong thing. But here's a secret. Even natives make mistakes. What really matters is that you keep talking. The more you talk, the more confident you become, and the easier it will be to overcome these blocks. Let's talk about how to overcome the fear of making mistakes when speaking. Imagine you are in a conversation and suddenly you forget a word or say something wrong. What do? Most people freeze or stop talking altogether, but the right response is to keep talking. Don't worry about getting all the words right. The important thing is to focus on getting the message across. If you don't remember a word, try to describe it another way. The essential thing is to keep the conversation flowing. I'll tell you about Daniel, one of my students. He was so worried about making mistakes that he got stuck whenever he tried to speak English. I told him that mistakes are not failures, but rather opportunities to learn. We worked together to build his confidence by practicing simple conversations, and I encouraged him to keep talking, even if he didn't know the right words. Over time, Daniel realized that the more he spoke, the more confident he became, and mistakes began to bother him less. This reminds me of a famous quote by Henry Ford. "Failure is simply the opportunity to start again, this time more intelligently. With each mistake, you learn to speak better next time." Now, another technique that can help overcome blocks when speaking is self-talk, or talking to yourself. When you don't have someone to practice with, talking to yourself can be a powerful tool. This technique is simple but very effective. All you have to do is talk to yourself in English, out loud, as if you were talking to someone else. You can do this while carrying out daily tasks like cooking, walking, or even getting ready for bed. Here's an idea of how self-talk works. Describe your day. Talk about what you did, where you went, or what you're planning to do. This helps improve your fluency and takes the pressure off practicing with someone else. When you don't have a partner to practice with, self-talk can be the solution. One way to use it is to plan what you are going to do the next day. Ask yourself, for example, what do I want to eat for dinner? And then respond in English. This will help make English a natural part of your routine. Also, imagine everyday situations, like being in a restaurant or meeting someone new. Practice what you would say in these situations. This helps prepare you to speak English in real contexts. I'll tell you about Sophie, one of my students. She felt blocked because she didn't have a speaking partner. I introduced her to self-talk, and she started practicing English every day while doing her morning routine. Over time, Sophie noticed that her confidence increased, and speaking English became more natural. Another technique that can help a lot to overcome blocks is shadowing, which we have already mentioned in previous chapters. Shadowing is so effective that it's worth talking about again. When you feel stuck, shadowing can be a way to keep moving forward. When you listen to a podcast or a story and repeat what the speaker says, you are practicing real conversational patterns without the pressure of creating your own sentences. Start with short, simple sentences, and, over time, move on to longer conversations. Shadowing helps you build fluency because you are practicing both listening and speaking at the same time. When you practice shadowing, that is, listening and repeating what is being said, you are not only improving your listening, but also your speaking at the same time. This helps you break down speech blocks, because you get the words and phrases you need to continue the conversation without feeling stuck. And best of all, you can find lots of stories and podcasts on my YouTube channel, made especially for beginners. These materials are perfect for beginners, as they help you develop fluency gradually, starting from the basics and advancing step by step. Now, another incredible strategy for breaking these blocks is role-playing, or role-playing challenging situations. If you think about the situations that make you most nervous, such as giving directions, having a job interview, or talking about a complicated topic, you can practice these situations in a relaxed way, as if you were actually experiencing them. The more you practice, the easier they will become. For example, if you feel nervous giving a presentation in English, practice speaking the presentation out loud to yourself, as if you were in front of an audience. If the idea of talking to a native speaker makes you insecure, imagine this dialogue in your head, without rushing, without fear of making mistakes. This type of practice will help you deal with these situations better in the future. The key is constant practice. The more you practice these challenging scenarios, the more confident you will feel when faced with them in real life. The most important thing, however, is to maintain a positive attitude throughout the process. Don't overexert yourself, and remember, learning is a journey. With every step you take, you're closer to speaking confidently and fluently. Be patient with yourself and enjoy the journey. Overcoming speech blocks also requires a positive mindset. It's easy to get frustrated when things don't go as expected. But remember, progress is more important than perfection. Every time you speak, you are improving, even if you don't feel it right away. Celebrate small victories, like being able to complete a conversation or learning a new phrase. As Walt Disney says, the difference between winning and losing is often not giving up. If you keep practicing, even when it seems difficult, you will overcome blocks and become a more fluent and confident speaker. Now, one of the most effective ways to overcome blocks is to practice in real situations. Go to places where you can use English, such as cafes, markets, or even participate in online language exchanges. The more you practice in real-world environments, the easier it will be to overcome fear and hesitation. And one of the best ways to practice is by talking to native speakers. But what if you don't know any natives to practice with? Don't worry. There are several ways to find people willing to talk to you, such as language exchange platforms, where you can connect with English speakers who want to learn your language too. This will help you put into practice what you have learned and give you the confidence you need to improve even more. Don't worry if you don't know any native English speakers, as there are many online platforms where you can connect with people who also want to practice the language. Best of all, they're learning too, so there's no reason to feel embarrassed about making mistakes. Overcoming speech blocks is not about never making mistakes, it's about keeping trying, even when things get difficult. With techniques like self-talk, shadowing, role-playing, and maintaining a positive attitude, you can overcome moments of hesitation and start speaking with more confidence. Now, you've already learned how to break speech blocks using these techniques, but what can you do to take your fluency even further? One of the best ways is to practice with conversation partners. Finding someone to speak English, whether online or in person, can make a huge difference to your progress. But what if you don't know anyone around you who speaks English? Don't worry, there are plenty of resources online to help you find conversation partners. Now, to conclude, I want to thank everyone for being with me today. I hope this story brought some excitement to your English learning journey. If you liked it or found it useful, leave a like, share with your friends, and subscribe to receive more educational and fun content. Your support and feedback motivate me to create even better stories for you. Stay tuned, because more exciting stories are on the way to make learning English easier and more enjoyable. Keep practicing and have a wonderful day.